CTA Review Board data model. This is arguably the most important technical diagram that you will build during your exam. You will have to refer to it frequently throughout your presentation. I cannot overemphasize how important this diagram is, because without it you simply cannot pass. Data models are the foundation of any solutions. I can sit here all day, talk about data models, but I'm pretty sure that you chose this video to learn how they're put together for the review board. Here we go. As you can see here, we have a combined Salesforce Sales Cloud and Service Cloud data model. I deliberately dropped some of the ancillary objects to make it more concise. There are numerous ways to arrange your data model, and this is just one of them. I practiced my data model countless times over the years and developed my own style that worked well for me during the review board. I encourage you to do the same. So you will see that I arrange the objects in a particular way, and of course we're using our good friend Lucidchart. You will not necessarily always have a person account, but in this case what I've done is I combined the account and contact here in the box and put person account here on the lower right. And to make sure that it stands out, I use the dashed line as well, so I can show you how that works. But right now I'm just going to talk about the arrangement and logical grouping of the various objects. So let's start with the core objects for the Sales Cloud. So obviously we start at the account and contact and move on to the opportunity, and let's not forget about the opportunity line items. So visually, my eye is going to go from left to right, so I'm starting my story about the account and contact being the foundation of almost any solution in Salesforce. And of course, if it's a business to consumer B2C solution, I'm going to introduce the person account. And so, of course, Sales Cloud wouldn't be complete without the opportunity, and we're not talking about any custom objects here either. So the next part would be the quote. A quote is not always necessary in a review board scenario, but it is present very, very frequently. So with quote, we also have the quote line items. And of course, over here, what I've done is I made the master detail relationships crow's feet red. Now, if you don't have the time for this and you would like to stick with one color, you can just simply put M : D. So basically then you'd have to say that everything else is a lookup by default. So over here we also will have M : D. Now, as a slight departure from the script, I want to point out that some of these are special relationships. So even though the technically relationship between the opportunity line and opportunity is a lookup, but it acts like a master detail. And also opportunities can roll up to an account. However, this is also a lookup relationship. So that's a special relationship. You can speak about this on the board, but I think it's not that necessary. It's not really going to add a whole lot to your presentation. So just only speak about it when asked. Okay, so what you can see here is we've got the opportunity, quote line items, order line items, and work order line items all on the right-hand side. Reason being that you would want to put the price book entry, which is a junction object between the product and price book, all the way on the right-hand side. And then it's easy to branch off from price book entry onto the various line items with various crow's feet. And so this way it's very, very clean, and it's easy to see where everything falls in. So let's move on to the left-hand side. So all of my Service Cloud objects are going to be right here on the left-hand side. So of course, what is the star of the show for Service Cloud? That would be the case. Now the case is off to the left because I would like to be able to add more things to the case and perhaps expand the canvas to the left over here and basically join some custom objects to the case as well. I will not necessarily always have all of these objects on the data model, but as I'm learning, as I'm practicing, and I perhaps don't know what to do every single time that I open the computer, I usually practice the various diagrams. I encourage you to do the same. We've got the case over here and the entitlement contract, We have our knowledge articles, so you can tell the knowledge articles story, or Salesforce knowledge rather, and then of course the contract and contract line items. So that would be if you wanted to go deep into that whole explanation. And of course the good old case milestone, well, milestones and entitlements usually go together. So you've got your milestone and case milestone, and then a case team member. So that would be my Service Cloud objects on the left hand side. So again, the sales is on the right, the service is on the left. Now going back up to the top over here, so I didn't mention anything about the contract being special in the sense that it shares the org-wide default with accounts. So those are joined at the hip, and unfortunately you cannot separate them. So that makes contract kind of a very restricted object, but yet it is very useful as well. So the contract here is somewhere between the account and opportunity, only because opportunity looks up to the contract, and the contract in turn looks up to the account. So that's why it kind of serves as a junction object between the account and opportunity. And I say kind of, because don't quote me on this. And right above account and contact, we have the account-contact relationship. So this is actually an object that maybe in real life is overlooked quite a bit. However, in this case, on the review board, it's actually very, very important, because there's a lot of sharing and visibility that is tied to it when it comes specifically to Experience Cloud, and I would say within the Experience Cloud customer community license. So that's why you will always would be well served to put ACR on the canvas. You can always take it away if you need to. And on the left hand side, I've got the asset. And so the asset, of course, is right above the Service Cloud, because asset is important for sales. It's important for service, because what you do is you end up servicing the assets, which are the products that the customer bought, and the case can look up to the assets. So it's a pretty clean relationship between the case and the asset over here. Now, as far as leads are concerned, so lead is not technically connected. It doesn't, nothing looks up to it except for the campaign member. So if you don't use the campaign member, then lead would be basically sitting kind of like this on its own. But we'll speak about how you can actually tell the story about lead conversion. So in this case, we are showing the campaign and campaign members. So this is not a Marketing Cloud focused diagram, but it is an honorable mention to show that actually, campaigns are important because they produce leads. They can also produce, they can be based upon existing contacts, but the whole point of a campaign, I would say, in the real world is to be able to market. So they do play a huge role in producing leads. So at any rate, here's the junction object. Again, it's in the middle. So it's basically how you position the object does matter, because then you have a lot less confusion, less spaghetti when it comes to the lines. If we zoom in over here, so you can see that I do not overlap my lines, just because it becomes very, very difficult to see which line is going where. And in this case, you can actually highlight the lines, and you can see that, for instance, the opportunity is looking up to the account. And what about this one over here? Well, all you have to do is scroll down, and you will see that the work order is also looking up to the account. So there are various schools of thought when it comes to this particular arrangement, but I just found that it's a lot better to have separate lines than to overlap the lines. And by overlapping the lines, so let's see if it'll let me do this. It's basically if you do something like this, where the lines are appearing like it's a single line, but then they branch off, and so then you will have something weird going on like so, and it becomes a lot more confusing as to what you're trying to point out over here. So it looks like there's only one object looking up to account, but there's actually probably multiple objects. So we're going to bring those back to where they were. And the last thing I'll say is that there's these line jumps. So line jumps are very, very useful. You can turn them on at the end or not. So if we are to bring the controls back, so the line jumps would be somewhere over where the line is. So just remember, these are called line jumps. So you want to go where the line is, and here's the jump. Now, in order to make them appear, what you have to do is just basically select all, and then go to the line and turn the line jumps on or off right over here. Let's switch over to an actual diagram which I produced when working on one of the countless mocks which I've done over the years while preparing for the review board. This one was for the United Bank mock, specifically geared towards the Data and Security 2-section retake. Because the exam was going to focus only on those 2 sections, I knew that the questions I would get from the judges would be quite a bit more detailed than what they normally are. This data model is fairly detailed, and it may scare you in the beginning. Believe me, it scared me too. With practice, this became possible. Now, did I mention that the 2-section retakes featured a full-size scenario, but you only got 1.5 hours to prepare your solution and the diagrams? Yes, that's right. Full scenario in half the time, and yet this is what was possible to produce alongside some other important diagrams which we will cover in another video. Let's explore this data model in more detail. Okay, it seems like a lot, doesn't it? It actually is. But keep in mind, this is not something that you produce all at once. You build this data model as you go, and you start with some of the fundamentals. So of course, before you begin, you actually have to read the scenario, but you don't have to read the whole thing end to end. In fact, I don't actually recommend doing that because this will rob you of some valuable time. So instead, you start reading the scenario and you start putting down onto the canvas some of the objects that you would expect to be there. And of course, since we practiced on the sales and service data model, this is actually where it's going to come into play. All right, so let's take a look. I would say one of the first things you would want to do is to put down that your default org-wide default is going to be private. And the reason being is that you want to hold yourself to the principle of least privilege, which is always a good idea when it comes to enterprise level scenarios, and especially the CTA Review Board. Okay, so once again, we are starting with the account and contact. And here I, of course, created the person account rectangle because this is a bank scenario. So there's going to be business to consumer elements as well. And as promised, I would point out that the lead is not really connected to the account or contact. Nothing looks up to it except for perhaps some custom objects. However, we do want to show that there's going to be conversion of a lead to account, contact, and opportunity. So what I've done here is added these dashed lines and put down conversions so that it would be obvious what is getting converted to what. And you can actually spread out this text as well. So look at what happened here. So I actually have various lines overlapping, which I said that was previously that's not a good idea. But when it comes to conversion, this is a story that you tell. And most people know that leads get converted to account, contact, and opportunity, but still important to say that. So at any rate, this would be, I suppose this is the only exception. Some of the other things that we want to point out is very, very important, not just to label your various objects, but to put down the ownership of the data. So in this case, I just put in the letter O for owner, and then of course the actor that I already covered in my actors and licenses section or slide. So the other elements that you will see here are LDV, so that stands for large data volume. It's important to not forget to put LDV where that needs to go. You will have a separate slide on that as well, but it just helps to tell that story. So as you can see, we've got the sales objects off to the right, and of course we got the product, price book, etc. And off to the lower left we have the case Service Cloud objects as well as the knowledge objects as well. Now, when the data model becomes fairly large and you have to scroll quite a bit, so perhaps you want to zoom in and show that you're going to be using the Salesforce scheduler right over here. So you've got the service appointment, and that's the start of that show. And there are various territories and service resources, etc. You will lose potentially the attention of the judges because now they don't see the account, they don't see the lead. And if you're on a small screen, like a laptop-sized screen, which is actually pretty common for the board, then what do? So in this case, I actually added the account lead words so that I could show that this lookup, in fact, is going to the account. Because if I can, of course, zoom out, but in the heat of the moment, you don't want to focus on that too much. You just really want to, flow with the story. So these lookups are particularly labeled like so in order to drive home the point that this is in fact an account type lookup, a lead, and so on. So here's something that may or may not become a problem, because if I don't click on this particular line, it's just going to disappear behind this object. So it's going to look like the survey invitation is going to be looking up to the case milestone, which is not correct, but you can always do something like this, or you can do something like this, and all of a sudden this ambiguity goes away. But this is something you, of course, will tell throughout your presentation. So what is different over here is I decided to put an asset right below the account and contact, only because for this particular mock it made sense. So I used an asset in place of a financial account. And so this is a standard object, as of course you know, but I'm going to relabel the asset and I'm going to call it financial account. So here I'm actually using both names, so it's like a very rare type situation where I say, okay, yes, this is an asset, so it's not going to count towards the data volume. However, it's going to be relabeled and used in place of financial account. So this is why it has two names. But besides that, of course, branch staff is the owner, and it is a large data volume object. Now you will notice that I also put _C and _X over here. So the reason that I only use one underscore is because that's all that you need. This is not an API name that you're going to be using for integrations. This is not something that you're using specifically within Salesforce. This is not going to change anything of how Salesforce works. This is just a diagram. So to save time, I only use one underscore. So it may seem like a small thing, but believe me, it all adds up. So then same thing here for the X, and so X being the external object. So this notation is universal. So anybody who's working in Salesforce, especially at the architectural level, knows that _C means custom and _X means external. So I chose this light green color for custom objects and light pink for external objects. Now, if you don't have the time to introduce these colors, so what you would do is then just leave it alone and just show the _C or _X, and you'll be able to tell that story that this is an external object, that's a custom object, and that should be just fine. In fact, I used to do that in the past. Okay, so just to recap again over here, so we've got the foundation, which is the account, contact, and person account. We have the sales objects over here to the right, so that will be the opportunity. Why? Because the lookup goes from the opportunity to the account. Okay, and then moving on to opportunity line items, and of course here we're going to be using products, various financial products that banks sell. And so price book entry is there's a crow's foot that goes from the price book entry to opportunity line items. We don't need order, we don't need quote, we don't need work order, nothing like that. That's financial specific type of a scenario. So in terms of leads, yes, of course they need the leads. So that's why lead is going to be over here on the top left, and there's going to be a conversion. And it actually made sense to have these financial products over here because this is something that was shown to customers throughout the lead qualification stage. So the financial products custom object is looking up to the lead over here. And then, of course, once the lead gets converted, this needs to stay. So that's why it's actually like a junction object. And also, it's very easy to show that the product, which is kind of a topmost object over here, has the crow's foot that goes to financial products. So it's all very, very, very clean. And remember, this is something that I was doing in an hour and a half, along with the solution itself and all the other diagrams also. All right, so now that we're done pretty much with the sales side, over here we have custom objects interspersed with asset, and to the lower left, as promised, are these service cloud objects. So of course, got the case, once again, the milestones, just to show that we have that. Entitlement is hanging off to the side off of the account. Now, mind you, here's something that's actually pretty specific. I'm not using the various colors of crow's feet, but I did put in here master detail. And I wanted to show that the master detail entitlement looks up to account itself, not just to the person account. So because here I actually did draw the crow's foot from the person account to financial product, just to show that this is meant for the customers. It's not meant for anybody else, not institutional customers. There's no B2B situation over here. But entitlement is actually accurately a detail side of the master detail relationship to the account. So just to show that we also are using knowledge, and I had the time, so I said, okay, why not use the knowledge articles? So the knowledge articles are off to the left while the milestones go down. Now, here I actually needed quite a bit more space. So what I did is I just used the very bare minimum, or I thought it was basically the bare minimum, just to point out that I'm going to be using surveys. So I've got the survey invitation and the survey version. Of course, there's quite a bit more survey objects. However, I really didn't care about spending so much time on surveys. So I just really used those two objects to show that this is what I'm using for surveys, and they wanted to double click into that. That's fine. I was able to tell that story as well, but it's just one of those smaller requirements. It is important, however, to capture that in the data model. Ordinarily, I probably wouldn't even add those to the data model, but again, this was for a data and security retake. So for that reason, I wanted to go deeper and with more detail. Now, over here, I wanted to say these folks are going to be scheduling their appointments with branch staff, and for that, Salesforce Scheduler works really, really well. So I did add some of the key objects to the Salesforce Scheduler. So we've got the service appointment, the main one, territory member resource, service resource, and a resource. Again, I always put the junction object in the middle so that it's easier to draw the crow's feet from both other sides. And over here we have the user object because of course the resource would be the internal user of the application. So these would be the people who are working for United Bank. And ordinarily I wouldn't even put the user object because this is one of those that is linked to almost every other object. As you can see, I only have this one crow's foot here and one over here. So I forget why I had to put two of them, but I'm sure there was a reason. And this is a special custom object to basically show that this is where the discipline was recorded, meaning I wanted to show that there is a regular, perhaps semi-annual review for that particular employee. And this is a sensitive object, therefore only the managers would have access to that object. So that's why it's hanging off of the user object over here. Okay, so again, this is all standard stuff. This is custom. Moving on to perhaps the final section over here. So we've got the, of course, consent management. And so again, quite a few more objects than what I'm showing on the actual real consent management product that Salesforce offers, but it is important to have the individual, of course, the individual object, as well as contact point consent and data use purpose. Just to show that there are different kinds of points of consent, so you can have the email and the phone number and address and social media and so on and so forth. And then, of course, again, this is a section retake, so I wanted to show that data use purpose needed to be there. Because that's what we're collecting the data for, and we wanted to show that we are legally doing this because we have a need to communicate with our customers, especially around financial regulated industry, and data use purpose was kind of important for that story. So that's basically the anatomy of this particular diagram. So again, if you zoom out, it looks pretty large. I haven't counted how many objects there are, but there's probably at least, say 30 or so. But again, some of the, something that I just forgot to mention, but I mentioned it previously. Don't forget about account contact relationship, ACR. Easy one to always forget because you probably don't think about it all the time. But believe me, you will if you want to pass this exam. I can't say that authoritatively every single mock or every single scenario needs one, but it's a good idea to use it. You can always remove it if you don't need it. And again, it's a junction object. It's easy to basically draw this crow's feet that would go to ACR. And so you can actually just put it right above the account and contact as well as the person account. So this is my story about the data model, and perhaps in a future video I will show you how to do this fast. So hopefully this will help you in your CTA journey, or journey to CTA as we like to say. So just remember, if you're kind of like stuck in analysis paralysis and you don't know what to do, in the morning of a particular day, you don't know what to study, you're feeling like you're boiling the ocean, just start drawing the diagrams, okay? That's going to serve you well, and that's never a waste of time, because without the diagrams, you just simply cannot pass. All right, so I'll see you on the other side of your comfort zone.